Good day everyone and welcome back to the channel. Yes, we're looking at Monarchs again, and no, I won't torture you guys again. We're talking about my history with this deck, don't worry. So today I'm going to do what I promised in the last time we looked at this deck, and rank the top 10 best support cards for the Monarch archetype. You see, Monarchs are a unique deck, and they're one of only a couple of decks that see meta relevance very early on in Yu-Gi-Oh! That have their entire deck redesigned so they can see a second shot at relevance. Yes, retro cards like Damnation and Blue Eyes White Dragon received a ton of new support in the mid-2010s, but neither of them were full-fledged archetypes until the new support. The only deck I can think of that was meta-relevant once in the DM era, and then successfully revamped much later, was another favourite of mine in Gravekeepers. So as you can imagine, reinventing such an old deck requires a lot of powerful new cards. We already covered the powerful revamped Monarch cards last time, so today we're going to be looking at the other parts that made this Monarch deck so powerful. This is the top 10 best Monarch support cards. Now the rules for this list is that the card must have been released after the original Monarchs, and I've seen most of its play in said deck. However, the card doesn't have to be an actual Monarch archetype card, it just needs to synergize well with the deck and see little play elsewhere. So that being said, let's begin. And right away we see the rule I set take effect, as our first spot goes to the most recent cards we add to Monarch decks, Anchromorphite. I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. A pendulum monster, you never thought I'd see one of those in Monarchs. This card can set itself in the pendulum scale, can destroy itself to draw you a card, and then if it's in your extra deck, you can summon it to the field. The catch is that in order for any of these effects to activate, you need to have an empty extra deck, making this card an ideal fit in Domain Monarchs, which sadly is still the most competitive way of playing the deck. Now Monarchs are known for their brickiness, so an extra card draw to fix bad hands is always good, and this card offers potentially two, as not only will it draw you one with its pendulum effect, but once summoned from the extra deck, this card can go alongside Karaz to get you an extra draw. Not the most interesting card to talk about, hence the number 10 spot on this list, but this card did do a little to help fix Monarch's biggest issue, so I consider this a you tried type of award. So from the newest support to the oldest, we have Treeborn Frog. Released all the way back in Shadows of Infinity in 2006, this little guy took Monarchs from Rogue at best in GOAT format to the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! For a good 2 years. This is because when the frog is in your graveyard, you can summon it back during your standby phase, as long as you have no set cards and no other copies of Frog on the board. So the frog essentially fixed the one thing holding Monarchs back in GOAT, that being you couldn't always guarantee tribute fodder. With this frog, however, in the days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where most players only summoned a couple of times at most a turn, you're pretty much guaranteed a Monarch turn 2 as long as you have one in your hand. Like I said, this card along with Raiza the Storm Monarch and later Caius the Shadow Monarch form the basis of the strongest Monarch deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! History in perfect circle, a deck that would dominate the game throughout all of 2007 until Dark Arm Dragon was released in 2008. However, this would be the last time our winged friend would lend a webbed hand to Monarchs, as with the release of new Frog support in Swap Frog, which could foolish a water to bounce itself to hand, Treeborn saw play once more, and Monarchs became a top tier all over again, with Frog Monarch becoming one of the best decks in Edison. And yes, I will talk about that at some point, don't worry. Now obviously this card is way too slow to see any play these days, but for its long history of pulling Monarchs out of obscurity and into tier 1 status, I have to give it number 9 on this list. And now we move on to the official Monarch support, a Monarch card within the Monarch archetype, starting with Return of the Monarchs. A continuous spell, Return showcases the two main features of modern Monarch cards, namely that it works with Monarchs by stats rather than by name, and it prevents you from using the extra deck. In this case, Return activates when a monster is tribute summoned, and allows you to either search for a monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, or 2800 attack and 1000 defense. Obviously intended to search another Monarch or for a tribute summon, but this card can also search as Majesty's Fiend and hilariously Dark-Armed and Pile-Armed Dragons. Also, this card is face up on the field, you can't use the extra deck, making this by far the strictest version of the Monarch extra deck restriction, and making this card only suitable in domain variants of the deck. One of the best of the Monarch cards released in the upgraded Monarch support, due to not being able to fix bricky hands or make tribute summoning easier, Return does have a purpose in Domain Monarch, however, and that is closing out games and searching out a powerful floodgate in the event we can't domain lock the field. Usually with this card, our top two targets are Majesty's Fiend and as the aforementioned floodgate to shut down monster effects if we need to control the field without domain, and 8th of the Heavenly Monarch, because if we have another Monarch on board, it's important to make sure we have an Aether in hand to trigger one of our best disruptions, which we'll talk about later. However, this card opens up the entire Monarch toolbox, giving us card draw with Kuraz, burn with Mega Thestos, and even field clearing if you actually are mad enough to run Dark Hand Dragon in your Monarch deck. Like I said, this card doesn't really help us fix bad hands or summon Monarchs, making it somewhat of a win more card, but the ability to search any boss in your whole archetype still makes it worth putting on this list. Honestly, this card could probably be a lot higher on this list, as the dominant form of Monarchs is named after it. However, coming at number 7 we have the Monarch field spell, Domain of the True Monarch. A pretty nasty floodgate, Domain is essentially half a Vanity's Fiend in a field spell, as if this card's controller has an empty extra deck, neither player can special summon monsters if you control a tribute summon monster, so that won't affect Monarchs at all but can be crippling for a large amount of decks. I don't think I need to explain why the Domain Lock is so powerful. After all, many similar effects to this are currently banned, including Vanity's Emptiness and Royal Oppression. However, one thing I will say, and this is the reason this card isn't higher on this list, it's not as good as it used to be, sadly. You see, decks like Kashtira, for example, can easily out this lock with Fenrir popping the tribute summon monster, as can Sprite with any monster plus Sprite Pixies, and of course many decks now side back row hate in the form of Cosmic Cyclone. So yeah, with power creep being what it is, the Domain Lock won't always get you the win anymore. However, there are 2 reasons this card still makes this list. 1, some decks still fold to Domain Lock, and 2, many people forget that the Domain has other abilities. Firstly, it can buff any tribute summon monster by 800 during battle. This is really good because it allows cards like Erebus and Aether to beat over massive monsters, most notably Dinos, which is important as Dinos as an example of a deck that can play well under the Domain Lock. Finally, Domain can also reduce the level of any monster with Mega Monarch stats by 2, essentially helping us out in a scenario where we lack Squires or a Monarch to tribute for Aether or Erebus. Domain may be a dated card, but with its ability to just shut down certain decks and get Monarchs out of tricky situations, I think it still deserves this spot on the list. Up next, we have the first of 2 cards in the directly fixing Monarch's biggest problem, that being bricking by opening up either too many tribute monsters, too many pieces of tribute fodder, or too many pieces of back row that need Monarchs to work. In Tenacity of the True Monarchs. By revealing a monster with Monarch stats in hand, this card allows you to add any Monarch spell or trap from deck to hand. Again, a simple effect, but much like Return of the Monarchs, a search card in a deck with a tendency to brick is always welcome. Basically, as long as you open a Monarch monster, this card pretty much fixes any problem you may have. It can search you anything from draw power to a searcher, to even a card that can tribute the opponent's monsters. We'll talk about those in a bit. This means that this plus a Monarch means it's far less likely that you'll brick in this deck, and if you have a good hand already, then searching Pantheism or Stormforth can help bolster an already impressive board with an extra floodgate or big body. Honestly, there's not much to say about this card, hence the mid-ranking, but Tenacity really is the grease that keeps the Monarch machine rolling, and you get a number 6 spot on this list. Up next, we have another interesting piece of support, a trap monster. But man, is the Prime Monarch an excellent if unusual piece of support. Both a continuous trap on field and a normal monster when summoned from grave, Prime is a versatile and powerful piece of support. Starting with its trap effect, Prime allows us to shuffle any 2 Monarch spells and traps back into the deck and draw a card. Now with cards like Pantheism as well as Monarchs like Aether and Erebus, your grave will likely flip with Monarch back row throughout the game, so fulfilling this pot of avarice effect is very simple, and like I said in earlier entries in this list, this deck can brick quite easily, so having the ability to see as many cards as possible helps mitigate that downside a lot. However, 9 times out of 10 you will never use this effect, as often the goal with this card is not to activate it on field, but to summon it from your graveyard as a level 5 trap monster with reverse Monarch stats. To do this, you must banish 2 Monarch cards from grave, which is the one reason this card isn't higher on the list, as these 2 effects do kind of contradict each other. Now the monster by itself is nothing special, although it can make for a good defender, as you can summon it during either player's turn, meaning it can be an impromptu blocker if things go poorly, but much like Treeborn Frog before it, it's a constant source of good tribute fodder, both to summon Monarchs to the field, and as a tribute for Kuraz's draw effect. So far so good, but what truly separates this card from the pack in terms of Monarch support is the fact that it's the best Monarch support for extra deck Monarchs. While still being somewhat focused on summoning big tribute monsters like the Monarchs and Fiends, Extra Deck Monarch, as the name implies, also focuses on spamming out powerful Links, Synchros and Rank 5 XCs, where the Prime Monarch is often a key piece in doing this, with Quick Draw Synchro and Quantum Red Layer, making powerful cards like Zolkin to go into Crystal Wing and Ptolemaeus. and this is why I rank Prime this high on the list. It's basically to diversify the Monarch playstyle, as opposed to reloading it into only playing Domain and big boss monsters and letting it make use of the extra deck to have much more of a diverse array of answers. For this I think the number 5 spot is more than justified. And next we have probably my most controversial pick, as at number 4 we have the Monarchs Erupt, a card that admittedly hasn't seen that much play, and has often seen more play in other tribute-based decks like True Draco than its namesake archetype. However, and I must emphasise this, it's a searchable skill drain that mostly only hits the opponent. How could I not put it high on the list? A continuous trap, the Monarch Erupts negates the effects of all non-tribute monsters on the field, as long as, once again, your extra deck is empty and you control a tribute summoned monster. However, the downside is it destroys itself at the end phase if you don't control a tributed monster. Now, ever since its comeback to 3 in the TCG, skill drain has been an anti-meta staple, so as you can imagine, one which is searchable and one-sided is extremely good. Once you have a Monarch on board, it becomes very hard for your opponent to out it, unless you're playing against something like Dinos, and unlike Domain, this card's effect pretty much hits every monster your opponent controls, meaning unless they have a back row hate or a big beater, good luck to them getting over your board. Like I said in the beginning, this card has seen more play in Draco than Monarch, due to Monarch having access to Majesty's Fiend, which has the same effect on a body. However, I'd argue in today's meta, this card is just as good as Majesty, and deserves a second look, as unlike the Fiend, this card has far less outs, and many anti-meta decks these days run at least 9 floodgates at minimum, so I feel there's room for this alongside Fiend and Domain. So for that reason, this underrated gem gets number 4 on the list. For number 3, I ask you viewers, what's a Monarch without his subjects? Well, in this case, not much, so coming in number 3 we have Ida and Eidos, the Light and Dark Squires. Now the Squires were a series of normal silver monsters designed to assist their Monarch, and these two definitely did that with gusto. Essentially a one-card Monarch, a deer on summon will summon any other Squire from the deck, usually being Eidos, and then on summon, Eidos would grant you an additional tribute summon. So essentially, one Ida could make any Monarch. In addition to this, upon being sent to the graveyard, a deer could take any banished Monarch's Power Trap card and put it back in your hand. And just so you know, in the number 2 spot on this list, the Monarch's got a very powerful draw card that can be shuffled back into your hand with this card. So because of this, a deer is definitely the more powerful of the two, being both a free tribute summon and an extra draw potentially. However, she couldn't do that without her buddy Eidos, so they both share the number 3 spot on this list. So let me ask you viewers, if you've been working for Konami in 2016, sorry for that thought, and they gave you the job of designing a new Monarch card, how would you do it? Well, I tell you, if it'd been me, I'd just give Monarch an FTK. But then once my boss had told me something so stupid, I'd probably make something like this. Pantheism of the Monarchs. A normal spell, Pantheism has 2 effects. First, it's an allure of darkness of sorts, allowing us to discard a Monarch spell trap card to draw 2 cards. And if that was the only effect this card had, it would already be one of the more powerful Monarch supports, because it's one of the best ways to filter your cards and unbrick your hand. However, that's not the only thing you can do. You see, upon ending up in the graveyard, Pantheism allows you to banish up to 3 Monarch spell trap cards from your deck and show them to your opponent. You then pick one of them, add them to your hand, shuffle the rest back into your deck. Note the one word I didn't use in that effect, different. Yes, that's right, when using this effect, it's perfectly legal to pick 3 of the same card, meaning you essentially draw 2 cards with this, and then search another of your choice. Like I said, I don't think you could design a better piece of Monarch support than that. Finally, what truly cements this card at number 2 on this list is the fact that it can be easily recycled using a Dia's effect to return it from the banish zone to the hand. Because of this, you can easily use this card to turbo through your deck and search several key pieces over a couple of turns. Now, you could make the argument that this card should be number 1 on this list, but personally I think there's one more card that deserves that honour. Speaking of which, and to no one's surprise, coming in at number 1 we have the Monarch Stormforth, which is probably the worst name in this list. In fact, my Word document literally had to separate the 2 words Storm and Forth when writing the script. It's by far the most powerful card printed for Monarchs, and along with Pantheism was one of the main reasons the deck saw success again in 2016. Basically, back during their first run of dominance in the mid-2000s, Monarchs would use cards like Brain Control and especially Soul Exchange as ways of summoning their monsters without anything on board, by choosing the opponent's monsters. This is a very powerful aspect of the deck, and the first iterations of Topic Monarchs literally used the name Soul Control because of this aspect. So when rebooting the deck in 2014 for the first time with the ill-conceived Mega Monarchs, an archetype that has seen almost no play in actual Monarch decks, Konami knew they needed a new version of Soul Exchange to make these clunky new monsters work. Spoiler, that didn't work, and created this. Like Soul Exchange, Stormforth allows you to tribute one monster your opponent controls to tribute summon a monster. However, Stormforth takes Soul Exchange and improves it in every way possible. Firstly, it has no cost to activate, unlike Exchange, which costs you a battle phase. Secondly, it's a quick play spell, meaning that paired with Aether, which you can tribute summon on the opponent's turn, makes it not only a good way to supplement tribute summoning, but also a form of disruption. And third, because how it's worded, it does not target the monster you tribute, meaning essentially it gives your Monarch deck their own searchable kaiju, and we all know how good that is in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Like I said, this card saw no play upon release, but you better believe that when the Monarch Switch deck came out and Aether and Erebus released, this card helped them rocket into a top meta contender, often being the way Monarchs would out problematic cards that couldn't be targeted like Cosmo Dark Destroyer. Even today this card is amazing if you can resolve it, being a clear answer to cards like Kashtira or Raiza. So for keeping Monarchs relevant for years and making them somewhat playable, even until present day, I truly believe Stormforth deserves the top spot on this list. And that's the list, everybody. I hope you enjoy it. Next time we move from tributing to normal summoning, and we'll look at the best normal summons in Yu-Gi-Oh! See you all soon.